Hello and welcome back to the Ideal Wealth Grower YouTube channel. My name is Axel Meyerhofer. I'm the founder of Ideal Wealth Grower and the host for today's episode. So the topic I would like to raise with you today comes from a little bit of an interesting little episode from last night. As you may have heard me say in other videos before, every day in the evenings we take our dog on a nice walk around the neighborhood, for one, to give him a little bit of exercise, but also to give ourselves a little bit of exercise. And we oftentimes use that time, my wife and I, to chat a little bit about the things that happened throughout the day. And one of the things that we recognized yesterday was we had a relatively warm day, which is very common here in the San Diego area. But the air temperature officially had gone down quite a bit. So during the day, it was like 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the time we were walking, it was like in the low 70s, like 72 or something like that. And you would actually think that it's just like nice, right? Like a little bit of a chill in the air, just nice to walk. But it felt way warmer than we would have anticipated based on what the temperature on our thermometer was saying. So we began to wonder, why is that? And then we realized, well, all day long, the sun had been pounding onto the street, onto the concrete sidewalks. And the really interesting thing, and I had recognized this a few times before in the past, but yesterday it was really pronounced, was there is a certain property that has basically a brick wall as the boundary right next to the walkway. And every single time we walk by there after a warm day, even though the sun was down, it was like 8:30 at night, it was dark and everything. And like I said, temperatures officially in the low 70s, that wall was radiating off a lot of temperature, a lot of heat. And so I started to think about, okay, well, what does that teach us actually? And it's kind of a little bit related. You may have heard in the news that the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change brought out a new report that now unequivocally says human beings and the activities that we all contribute to the environment have something to do with climate change. And a lot of the changes that we see, whether it's massive wildfires, massive flooding, more intense tornadoes and hurricanes and all these kind of weather events, are caused by us polluting the environment constantly in really, really large amounts and haven't really taken enough steps to reduce it. I wrote an article not too long ago about a book that Thomas Friedman wrote decades ago, where he tried to find a term, and I'm not sure that he was actually the inventor of that term, but he tried to find a term that would actually describe how will the future of this more polluted environment actually look like. And there were like global warming was a big term that people used to use, or climate change is a little bit more common these days. But what he, I think, found to be a much more precise and much more fitting term is what he called global weirding. And global because it really happens everywhere. I'm originally from Germany, and there were just unbelievably devastating floods. And the interesting part about it is these floods were in areas that are used to flooding, but the volume was just so absolutely overwhelming that massive amounts of things were destroyed. More than 100 people died. Just a few days ago, something very similar happened in Paris, in France, right? Like hail the size of like golf balls damaging all kinds of things. We have seen it here in the US. We have massive wildfires in Oregon and in Northern California, all kinds of things like that happening all over the globe. In China, they had massive flooding and actually had so much water going into their reservoirs that they had to let it overflow the dams and stuff like that and turn off the power generation, all these kind of things. And I think the term global weirding, meaning like these events are weird, they are so off the charts, they are so unusual, so extreme, that we don't really have any kind of terminology, and they're happening all over the globe because the whole earth is affected. So when you ask yourself, well, why is Axel talking about this in the context of the Ideal Wealth Grower, which is a channel to talk about real estate investing? So the reason I'm talking about it is because we as investors in residential real estate should ask ourselves, what can we do when it comes to selecting properties and making the decision for one, is the property the right deal for us? but also at the same time looking a little bit ahead. Keep in mind, if you are on the journey, like I always recommend, to get to your time freedom point where you actually don't have to exchange time for money any longer, and you can decide what you want to do with your time because you have enough passive income. For most people, that's a journey of 8, 10, 12 years. And it's a journey to a destination, but when you get to the destination, it's not just you plop down and never do anything again. What actually happens when you get to that destination is basically the joy to be able to have the freedom to do what you want. You might want to paint, you might want to travel, you might want to take up a hobby as a full-time occupation. You might reduce your job to half-time or not do it at all anymore. So when you reach that time freedom point, it's not the end, it's the beginning of a new future, right? And for the properties, that also means from that point on, the passive income that they generate needs to keep coming, and ideally, as the mortgages get paid down, it will increase, because each and every time a property is paid off, you don't have to pay the mortgage anymore, so that increases your passive income into your pocket. And you also have probably the likelihood over long periods of times, not just 8, 10, 12 years, but let's say 20, 25, 30 years, that over that long period of time, the value of your property is increasing just because of prices increasing in general and inflation. And as you see right now, we have pretty high inflation, so the acceleration of the value is a little bigger than we had it in the last 10 years, but there always have been increases in value. If you ask your parents or grandparents, what did you pay for the house that you originally bought when you first bought a house, and you hear that number, you will be probably laughing, right? For the amount of house that they got 20, 30, 40 years ago to what you have to pay for a similar house these days. And that is mainly due to the fact that inflation and changes in the economy and so forth increase the value. The same thing will happen to your portfolio. So you have two things. You pay down the mortgages, you will probably increase the rents. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, if you ever needed to, you can keep adding to your portfolio, add more properties to it, even after you reached your time freedom point, if you slowly like to further increase your passive income. But no matter what, there is the more enjoyable life is after reaching the time freedom point. And so that means, yes, we are on the journey. We're very focused to find properties that perform well and that are financed well and that are done well and that are in good neighborhoods and all of that. But we shouldn't restrict ourselves just from today to the point where we reach the passive income number that we want to reach, but way beyond that. And that also then means, okay, from a climate perspective, from a global weirding perspective, from a where are we going, probably, we want to maybe look at what are the properties that we are considering allow us to do in that context. So I mentioned when I started this video that wall that we walk by that is right at the edge of the walkway that heats up with the sun during the day and then reflects back the heat at night. Well, what could be done, which would be a cool thing, and that could even be done after a property has been built. Now, in our areas, most places in the United States, we're building houses still like we always have, with wood stick building. Like you take 2x4s or 2x6 and line them up, and then you fill in insulation and you have sheetrock on the inside and some sort of siding on the outside. What could be done as one alternative is you look at a south-facing wall and you take part of that wall, doesn't even have to go all the way up to the roof, but take part of that wall and replace it with masonry, and then inside let, for example, copper pipes run on the inside. What will that do? That will basically help you heat your water with the sun that is hitting that south-facing wall all day long, and the fluid that is circulating through the pipes will be heated up through the sun and then can go into a well-insulated water tank, and you don't need to use gas. Now, that doesn't mean you will always be able to run hot water without gas, but it would actually supplement the need for gas, right? So why do we want to do this? Because natural gas is better than burning oil or gasoline, but natural gas is still polluting the environment and increasing the CO2 output into the air. So if you could, just by putting up a wall, running some copper pipes or other material pipes inside the wall, it doesn't really change your property in any significant way, but it helps you to generate free energy, free heat for your water heater. Now, we have talked in previous videos about putting solar systems like photovoltaic systems on your roof. And this is actually also something where when we are seeing that properties that have been in the marketplace, that have been built in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and are now up for sale, maybe having been renovated and up for sale for us as investors to buy and then rent to people. There's also a secondary community of builders coming along that are building houses for the purpose of renting them out so that we as investors can buy them, they're brand new, and then we can rent them out. But what you want to look in that context is how much has that builder thought about what systems can we put into the house that actually allow us to be long-term prepared for the changes in the environment. So one of the things that falls into that category is separation of waters, right? So we talking about number 1 and number 2 and so forth when we teach our kids. What that means is there is blue water, gray water, and black water. If you're into RVing, you would know about this. If you're not into RVing, what that means is blue water is the water that has the highest quality drinking water that you would use for cooking, for any kind of drinks, for tea, coffee, stuff like that. But when you really look at your water consumption for a month or for a year, whatever time period you want to use, you will find out that only a tiny, tiny fraction of the water that is actually consumed in your household is really for the purposes of cooking and drinking. So then the rest, the vast majority, is used for running your dishwasher, running your washing machine, shower to run for the shower, and to use in the toilets, those kind of things. Now think about it. Is it really necessary that you have drinking water quality for your toilets? Is it really necessary that you have drinking water quality to run the washing machine and those kind of things? Now, dishwasher, yes, you need drinking water quality. But when you think about it, there is a quality of water that is kind of semi-clean that would be well good enough, for example, for the toilets, right? And what does that mean for us when we're looking at properties, especially when they're built to rent, when they're brand new? Has the builder thought about, okay, if somebody has taken a shower or has run the washing machine or has run the dishwasher, the water that is then coming out is considered gray water. It is not drinking water quality anymore, but think about it, it would be plenty good enough for two things. It would be good enough to use to flush your toilet for number 1 and number 2, and it would also be good enough to water anything around the house that you want to be growing, whether it's just for ornamental or if you decide you want to grow some veggies or some fruits and stuff like that. What would that mean for the construction of the property? Now, number 1, you would have to build in a plumbing system that is actually separating the places where you need drinking water quality and the places where you have gray water quality. And the gray water should, for one, be directed from some sort of storage system to your toilets, and it should be directed to a tank so that you can use that water instead of taking drinking water to water your plants, and take that gray water and water the plants and everything around your house. So that is something that is much easier done when the property is in construction, thought about right from the get-go. The next thing you can think about is, I don't know if you've ever taken a look, and if you haven't, then go on the internet and search for Tesla solar roof. When we're talking about photovoltaic systems for energy production, most people are familiar with the fact that you can put panels on your roof. But what that means is basically you have a roof that is perfectly fine to serve the purpose of any roof, and then you put panels, square panels, on top of that roof. Now, the Tesla solar roof is a new solution where the actual roof tile or whatever kind of shape you would like to have the solar capability built in. Now, why is that helpful? Number 1, you don't need to first buy a roof and then put panels on. Number 2, it's all integrated, so it's built in a way that is absolutely waterproof. It has the same kind of warranties, and it looks much better. And that's, for a lot of people, an issue, especially when you're buying a house in any area where you have a homeowners association, where you may, by the CCRs, and you can look this up in our terminology explained videos, where the CCRs say you cannot change the appearance of the outside. But if the houses that when they are built already have a totally integrated solar roof, where the roof material itself that you see is also a solar panel, then that issue isn't even there. Now, the other part that comes with that is if you have a very large area, the whole roof area, to cover with a solar roof, you're probably generating more electricity, especially during the day, and especially if you're not in the house most of the time during the day, than you really need. And you can feed that back either into the grid, or you can feed it into what's called a microgrid. And I'm telling you all of these things and talking about these things, not so much because they are very common yet, but because we should think about it. And if we have an option to buy something that we want to own 10, 20, 30, 40 years, that as much as possible in especially new construction houses, it should already be provisioned into it. It should already be prepared for it or built like that. And why? Because microgrids are probably going to come. How does that work? What is microgrid? Microgrid for a house means you have an integrated solar system. Now, ideally, you have these Tesla solar roof shingles on your house and it looks beautiful and still is a solar system. If that doesn't work for some reason, you can still do the stuff with the panels and put as many panels as possible. Now, I know the utility companies don't like that and they don't want to give you permission, but I believe strongly that sooner or later we're going to get to a point where you as the owner of the house can determine how much you want to cover your house with panels or shingles. And it should be, if you ask me, every square inch that you have or every square centimeter that you have available. Now, then what you also want to take into consideration is you have the option to put some of the electricity that you don't use yourself into the main grid, into the public grid. But microgrids is going to mean that in a neighborhood, like I'm living here on the street, it's a cul-de-sac that has probably like 15 houses. We would be predestined, basically ideally suited for a microgrid, where each one of the houses has a certain amount of solar to provide. We have a central storage location and we're all contributing, and our houses are all in a little bit of a different situation. Some have more big trees or in front of the house and stuff like that. But together, there is no doubt that if we had a way to store the energy that we're producing over the day, that we could easily provide all the electricity day and night that our little neighborhood, our little microgrid would need. And the storage solutions for that, the so-called mega packs that Tesla offers and other companies like Sun, for example, or a German company called Sonnen, those are large scale, almost like commercial scale batteries that can store a lot more energy than a little battery that you might have in your car or in any other way that you may have seen. So that's one thing. Now, the other thing, you want to look at the electricity settings in this house that you might be considering to purchase as an investment property from a build to rent provider or contractor. Because with the electricity, we are all, as you just heard the Biden administration announce, we are all on the journey to, as much as possible, electrify transportation, right? Yes, the executive order says we want to get to 50% by 2030, but I think the reality will show that we're probably going to go for more faster. And what that means is more and more of us will either have an electric vehicle, or maybe if you jump over that step and you're actually doing the next logical step after that is not even owning a vehicle anymore, but you're basically ordering the service of using a vehicle to get from A to B, and you can choose which one that should be, and it drives you there and you pay a fee, but you don't have to upfront pay $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to get a vehicle. So either way, these vehicles will be electric. Now, if you still own a vehicle, it would be important that you can use this energy that your roof is producing, not just to run your dishwasher or your computer or stuff like that, but also to charge your car. And you can clearly see you don't want to buy a house that is pretty much brand new. And then you say, okay, so where is the electrical lines to set up my car charger? Where are the electrical lines to put the solar system on the roof because you didn't put this on when you built the house? Where is the plug that I can use to basically provide energy into my car? And very soon, I'm thinking in the next 5 years, we will have a situation where your car can also provide energy into the house. So think about that situation. During the day, sun is coming down, it's middle of the summer or even in the fall. you may be at home, or you may be only in one room at home working. Your solar system is pumping out electricity like crazy, and it pumps it into the battery of your car. And the car is sitting outside in the driveway, right? So there will be, in the not very distant future, a way where at night when the sun is down, this battery in your car can feed the electricity back into your house, right? Maybe not all of it, because you want to still retain the ability to drive around. But if you say, well, typically I don't need to drive anywhere further than 50 miles, and that might be possible to do with 20% charge on your battery, so 80% can feed your house. Right, so you basically have a closed cycle. But for all of that to work, to be able to plug in your car to charge it, to be able to switch the other way around and have the car provide electricity to the house, to have the solar system on the roof that actually provides electricity either to your car or to a battery that you hang on the wall to store the energy, all of those things require wiring. And how horrible would it be that you get a built-to-rent brand new house, and when you look at, okay, how well is it prepared for the environmental changes that we are all facing, where we should use more alternative energy sources like the sun, which is basically free. And in most places, I mean, oftentimes I hear the argument, well, it wouldn't work where I live. That's not true. Because there are countries like Germany and Norway who have much, much worse weather conditions than most places in the United States, and it works there. So I think they have proven the case that you can make it work, especially with the modern system. You can make it anywhere in the United States. The point that I'm trying to make is there are many, many things, and I want to encourage you to really take a look at, what about the water? What about the plumbing in my house? What about the electrical in my house? What about the wiring preference? Even if the systems, if the solar isn't there yet, the car charging isn't there yet, your house battery isn't there yet, but has the builder taken into consideration where we're going in the next 10, 20, 30 years? Because those things are going to be coming. And I would hope, and I'm going to start looking for that myself, I hope we can all together find contractors, find builders who are willing to put these things in, even if they don't build out all the systems for us, and where we are willing to say, yes, that might not allow me. So let's say you have a house that would normally cost $150,000, $170,000 to build, and because of all those provisions, it costs $200,000. Now, will you find a tenant that is willing, especially when those systems aren't installed, to give you $2,000 versus $1,700 in the same neighborhood? That might be tricky. If you're lucky, you find somebody who is environmentally conscious and willing to pay those $200 or $300 extra. But on the other hand, you know that if you have all these provisions in your property, and as we're progressing further and further into ways to use different kinds of energies and be more self-sufficient with our properties, all those provisions that you paid for when you bought the house will be helping you massively to get to that 1% and beyond. So that's why I want to encourage everybody to consider, for this special case where you can find a builder who puts these kind of things in, to be willing to pay a little more and forego a little bit of the 1% rule that otherwise applies when you're talking about renovated properties. And the next step after that, and we can do another video about that, is to see, can we find turnkey providers like the ones that we typically work with that would be willing to have a certain amount of the properties that they renovate to be renovated in a way that is environmentally conscious, based on where we are already right now with all the issues in the environment, and where we're going in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Because when they renovate a property down to the studs, that's the best opportunity to put the plumbing, put the electrical, put all those kind of systems in that otherwise would be a nightmare when you have already finished renovating or building the house to put this in afterwards. So I hope this was interesting, and what I really like to trigger with this particular kind of video is for you to start thinking, what do I do in my life? How am I actually affecting the environment? What can I do in the property that I live in? Or what can I do in the properties that I'm going to look to buy to increase my portfolio, to reach my time freedom point? What can I do looking ahead to the things that we can see, whether it's Biden saying he wants 50% electric cars or all kinds of other things that are going to come in the future, and how can you be ahead of the curve? So that would also be a great point for me to say, this is one of the topics I would love to talk to you about. right? And so we have in the process of starting a new series that we're also going to publish here on YouTube, where we interview people. So if anybody is familiar with environmental system, housing systems, has any experience with knowing any builders, any turnkey providers, any kind of organizations that propose this kind of stuff, that support this kind of stuff, so that our community can learn from you, please raise your hand, put a comment down below in the, under the video, and let me know that we can talk to you, that we can interview you, that we can make that information available. So I hope you liked this video. Give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. Please subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and ring the little notification bell so you get notified when we have more videos coming out. So that's it for today. Be well, stay safe, and I see you in the next video.